to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta, and I am the Quiet Warrior, and I'm excited to be with you today as my solo cast episodes continue. And what an incredible week it's been. In fact, today's show was inspired by some true events. And so let me get to that in just a minute, but I want to start off with some perspective. And I'm going to dedicate this show to a very young woman who's struggling right now. And I've asked my entire network for prayers. Why I'm sharing this story on my radio show is because I've sent her privately a message through Facebook. She's in hospital after a tragic accident. That she was actually out walking her dog, and a semi-truck, as I understand the story, ran over her. And well, you can just feel chills in your spine now as I tell that part of the story. I won't get into all the private details. The injuries are severe, and many blood transfusions, and being in the hospital even in this COVID-19 situation is definitely not a good place to be. But, you know, let's put it in perspective. I'm dedicating the show to her, and I reached out and told her that I'm officially inducting her into the Quiet Warrior tribe. Many of you don't know, but as I bring guests on, if they're authentic and we release their shows, I induct them into the global Quiet Warriors. It's a tribe of people who have shared their authentic stories on my show and who commit for their life to continuing to use their stories to change the world, to contribute, to give back, to do something with passion and purpose, because that's really what life's about, right? Well, her life almost came to an end. And when I think about all the worries about shortage of supplies and the COVID-19 and our jobs and things, and then I had a story like that hit close to home. This is an extended family member and young 20s age. It really said, Tom, life isn't as bad as it could be. So I'm dedicating my show to that. Let's move on. Today, it was inspired by true events that happened. Let me start off by telling you about that. As you know by the show title, we're going to talk about how to lead through a crisis like COVID-19, but to achieve a few important things. One is to reduce anxiety and stress, leading to increased hope that there is a future. And most importantly, lifting the stigma of mental health, which, as you'll soon see, my TED Talk, which will be released very soon, had a lot about mental health in it because it's a passion of mine. And so I believe that as a leader, you know, we own the power to lift the stigma of mental health. And in a time like this, I'm reading the headlines and I'm seeing mental health everywhere. As you're listening to me, are you stressed out about this situation? Are you feeling maybe not only anxiety, but perhaps some are feeling a bit of depression? You see, the human condition of mental health is quite normal. Mental health, we all have it. When mental health leads to a condition of extended emotions and perhaps even some pain, then, well, it becomes something we need to manage and deal with. What leaders don't realize is in today's business world, everybody is experiencing a lot of mental health and pressure. Yet for those who are deemed to be essential services, they have to go to work and put themselves in harm's way. I mean, let's take our hats off for all the essential workers. Let's talk about the nurses and the doctors, the healthcare sector. Incredible. You know, at 7 o'clock p.m., I live in Vancouver, British Columbia. You can hear people banging pots and pans and the sirens screaming on the streets. Literally, everybody stops and goes outside and pays tribute to first responders, putting themselves in harm's way. But there's many others on the list. There's people who work in grocery stores because that's an essential service. And you go into some of these grocery stores, big box stores such as a Costco, which is in my neighborhood, and you'll find that employees aren't wearing masks. They don't have, the suits that protect them. They literally are in blind faith, trusting their employer is going to look after them and that people are going to social distance in the store and do the right thing. Well, I digress. Not everybody is doing the right thing, but the world is learning to come together because of what's happening right now with the epicenter in New York City in the United States. Incredible numbers. Where am I going with all of this? Well, what had happened was that about a week or so ago, I was called to do an interview on a radio show. It was an American radio show, 610 WTVN talk radio in Columbus, Ohio. Now, for those who don't know, the Quiet Warrior Show is part of my overall work, but I'm also a strategist, a business expert, and I get asked to appear on TV and radio periodically as an expert to talk about things. And well, WTVN, that interview, you can find it on my Facebook wall. You'll see the entire thing there and be able to hear it. But throughout that interview, I talked about this whole situation about leadership. What had happened was a headline was in the news, and I'm just going to pull it out here on my paper. An American headline. It wasn't a nice one. It says, "I'm putting my grandma's life in danger. Postal workers say they're not being protected." Now, this was a one-page article and it was pretty damning, and it was actually about the United States Postal Service. Now, as I'm not going to read it all to you, we don't have time on this podcast, but some of the things I picked out of it when I went on the radio show to talk about it with the host, and his name was Dave Mann, a wonderful guy. First of all, they talked about one death in the article of an employee, and then they went on further to say that management had promised information and supplies and equipment and communication for its distressed employees. Sound familiar? And well, then they said that management failed across the board to assuage the concerns. And well, further it goes to say that the letter carrier in Cincinnati said, "My supervisor absolutely doesn't care about the health and well-being of their employees." What a brutal statement, right? I mean, I said to Dave Mann on his show, I can't believe that any supervisor would wake up in the morning and not care about their people. There's more to this. It went on to say that, a single mom took 2 weeks off because of her concern for her safety, and that the United States Postal Service responded with a statement to this article. And the statement was this, in quotes, "encouraging healthy behaviors and protocols, including frequent hand washing, use of sanitizers, and additional cleaning of workspaces, et cetera, et cetera." But the very article goes on to say that whoever spoke out to the press on this said they can't get their supplies. And so sending out a blanket talk point from corporate office saying this is what you have to do when you don't have the tools kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, I'm a Canadian, and quite frankly, most Canadians wouldn't go quietly to the press and create a headline like that. The United States Postal Service is a great service. I'm sure there's a lot of people there that work and trust it. There's 630,000 employees in the United States Postal Service. And so for some few to go out and create this type of headline, to me says, you know what, that's not really the culture or the kind of people we want working in a business. I went on to say to the host, Dave, that, when you have a time of crisis, everybody is in the same boat. And who's accountable to solve a crisis? It's not management alone. It's not employees alone. It's management and employees. Everybody on the face of the earth now is dealing with this issue. So we have to work together, come together, collaborate. And spouting off in an article like this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So what had happened was I was asked to speak about that. And I remembered that about a week before I had come across, this is actually something I fact-checked, but I came across a Twitter from Jeff Bezos. Most people know that name. Hopefully you know him as the founder and CEO of Amazon, not the richest man in the world. Although what an incredible story of Amazon he had built. But my reason to tell you about this is on Twitter, he wrote a letter to all over 700,000 employees, an open letter, and he was taking his own leadership style. He communicated to the employees. And I read that letter, and then I sent it off to several people I know saying this could be a good template if you're a leader communicating through a crisis. And then further went on to, I sent it to a fellow named Steve Anderson. Now, Steve, you might have heard him on my show. Steve is a fellow author. I'm an author, of course. Many of you know that. And he wrote a book called The Bezos Letters. Does that ring a bell? Bezos, Jeff again? Well, he found that embedded in each one of the annual shareholder letters that Bezos had written right from day one when he started the company, he had buried principles that Steve, being an analyst, analyzed and turned it into a book on how to grow your business like Amazon, readable, relatable principles that you could apply to even a small business. So I thought it was fascinating. So I sent Steve that. And the next thing you know, I see that there's a publication that came out. And, well, that publication was from Steve in a magazine called Work Life Special Edition. Now, Work Life Special Edition, you can find that online. You can Google it, and I'm going to read a little bit from that as well. But Work Life is actually a magazine, and it's a digital magazine. And in their April 2020 edition, it was about this topic: what is Jeff Bezos doing, leading Amazon through the COVID-19 crisis? And it was like a perfect storm. So I know I gave you a lot of facts and background, but I wanted to be factual about this. I've done a lot of research for today's show, and that one headline in the United States news about the Postal Service led to me being interviewed for 15 minutes on a radio show in Columbus, Ohio. And on that show, I brought this letter that I found Jeff Bezos had written. And then I quoted out of an article from Work Life Special Edition that was written by my friend and fellow author, Steve Anderson. I quoted 7 principles that could be a template for leading or communication through a crisis. And so let me get into that now in a little bit more detail, now that you have the background on where this has all come from. And I'll say this, that I don't ask people to believe what I say. I just ask you to listen to what I know. Feedback is a gift, I was told when I was building my career. And it's a gift. It's what you do with it that really makes a difference. You don't have to agree with it, but if you reflect on it, it can make a difference. And I just love this article. So let's start off with, first of all, another formula I want to give you called the anxiety equation. I was recently on another podcast called the Local Anxiety Podcast. The host is a fellow named James Kasha. And I was doing an interview there, riffing with him about mental health. And I said to him that I had taken a course called cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, many of you know I fell and got a concussion a couple of years ago and dealing with things, including some depression and side effects of concussions that can be pretty serious. And they sent me to a course. The word cognitive means thoughts, and behavior is the way your thoughts behave. And I learned some things in this course about anxiety. And one of the most fascinating parts was that there is an equation that best describes anxiety. I have never heard this before, but I'm going to give it to you. If you think of a fraction, the number 1 is the numerator, the number 2 below the denominator. And I wasn't that great in math, but I still can remember what a fraction looks like. So that would be the fraction of 1/2, 1/2, right? So the anxiety equation is, and you can write this down or come back to the show and write it down. Anxiety equals, in the numerator, the belief that bad stuff will happen, and in the denominator, the belief I can cope with this. Okay, so the belief bad stuff will happen over the belief I can cope with this. So if you think about the COVID-19 crisis and you tune into the news, social media, and all the crap that's there, you're basically getting a lot of feelings and thoughts that make you believe. Your brain only does one thing, it just creates thought, but it makes you believe that there's a lot of bad stuff that's going to happen. And when we're uncertain, we fill in those blanks. The bottom of the equation, believe I can cope with this, that comes from certainty. It comes from being told or showed evidence or proof that things are going to get better. But where does that come from in a time of crisis? Well, the number 1 tool a leader has, and if you're a leader, it means you have somebody you lead. To me, I use it in teaching the definition of a leader. They have one job, and that's to create other leaders. So we can spin it and say, well, I'm a leader in my home. I'm a leader on my sports team. Whatever you are, if you're a leader, and you have 1 or more people that you're leading, well, then this is something that you need to listen to, and maybe take some notes and apply it. And so we can communicate, and we can shift that anxiety equation. And what we want to do is we want to target the bottom of it, which is the belief I can cope with this. We want to increase that. And if you know about fractions, if you increase the bottom, and the top's getting big because the belief that bad stuff will happen is happening every day when we hear this in the media. But if we want to target and get anxiety now, we just have to increase that bottom of that fraction, or the denominator, as I call it. So we want to increase the belief I can cope with this. And so leaders start communicating. And on the radio show that I did with WTV and 610 Talk Radio in Columbus, Ohio, I actually did that show right after their governor's address. And I listened intently on the line to the governor talking there. And that reach of the radio show is 88 different parts of Ohio. And I was blown away at how he was communicating in a certain way that was increasing the belief that, I can cope with this. He was doing all the right things. And I said that to Dave Mann on the radio show. I said, Dave, your governor has done a really good job of giving hope, of creating a focus for people, laser focus. So I thought that was kind of interesting to get that perspective, just waiting for my talk. And what Bezos did is he after he wrote that 700,000 people letter, well, he decided to continue to communicate and over communicate. And so let me now turn to the article. I'm just turning in my studio here to look at my tablet. So pardon me while I shift in my chair here, as long as I don't fall off my chair. And many of you know that my shows are unscripted. They're authentic. I never edit them. So what you get today is what you get, even a few bloopers. Oh, there's my glasses that almost fell on the floor, my reading glasses. So these are the 7 principles. What happened on the Dave Mann talk show is I got cut off because they had to get back to the governor and their programming. So I was only into 3 of these, but I'm going to try to go through all 7 of them with you today, given I believe that we have a little bit of time. Number 1 is acknowledge reality. This isn't business as usual. This is what Bezos' opening paragraph in his letter was. This isn't business as usual, and it's a time of great stress and uncertainty. Your employees know we're in uncharted waters, and so platitudes won't work. So Bezos went on to say that across the world, people are feeling the economic effects of this crisis. And I'm sad to tell you, I predict things are going to get worse before they get better. Wow. I mean, oh my God. You're probably saying to me, Tom, what are you smoking? Because how's that going to reduce anxiety? Well, just hang on, because I'm going to get through the whole letter. But what you have to do is, I said this to somebody else the other day, is that imagine that in a time of the Great Depression where there was no internet, there was no social media, people didn't get real information real time. But today, you have to think that if you're a leader running a company or running a department in a company, you have to understand this, that no matter where you sit, know that the people in your business on the ground floors and all the way up to the penthouse are in fear. Even if the COVID-19 virus hasn't infected anybody, people are in fear. Why? Because they're hearing about it on the news. They're hearing it on social media. They're hearing it from their friends. And so when they don't get communication, the brain tries to fill in the blanks and validate it. So it draws on past experiences and emotions, things that have happened like this in the past or that it concludes might be like this. We tend to get information, as I said, from others, and then we start validating and believing. And because of our reptilian brains, this is science, our brains are wired to think the worst can happen. That's because we were all born to survive on the earth. And so the worst can happen, can start filling in this nightmare that grows and grows. Well, as a leader, if you're not getting ahead of the curve like Bezos and writing a letter to your people and then teaching your people to communicate the facts on a regular basis, you're going to be in a state of crisis on the ground floor. So, number 1, acknowledge reality. Point number 2, reinforce the mission. I love this one. I won't read the actual letter to you, but what Bezos did is he actually reinforced the mission of Amazon, and he quoted from his 1997 letter to his shareholders. He said, "We are working to build something important, something that matters to our customers, something that we can all tell our grandchildren about." And so what he did in his letter to the employees regarding COVID-19, now in the year 2020, he said, he reinforced that vision this way. He said, it's also a moment in time when the work we're doing is its most critical. We're providing a vital service to people everywhere, especially to those like the elderly who are most vulnerable. I mean, that's so cool, right? So what you do is if you're a grocery store, for example, you take your mission and then now you tie it to something that you can solve in this COVID crisis, something that is bigger than just your grocery store, that's impacting the world, that's helping people that are vulnerable. And so if we run a grocery store, we remind all the employees that we're here to feed and serve the public. Now our mission is even more vital because we're keeping people alive and the flow of goods and materials through the food chain to those people for good health, to get through this difficult time. And this is really important. The mission in your business can be tied directly to the COVID-19 crisis if you use some creativity. All right, here's the third principle. What are we doing now? What I said to Dave Mann in the interview in Columbus, Ohio that day, is I said, why is it in that article about the United States Postal Service? Why are people saying that management's not communicating or providing information? And so the thing here is that you need to communicate often, no matter what. Bold statement, even if you don't have all the facts. You want to tell people, what are we doing right now? And even if you're not able to do it, what are we trying to do? And if you're failing to do something like getting cleaning supplies, be truthful. Say, this is why we've got it on back order because of the pandemic. The world exploded for the supply chain. It choked it. And he said something here in his letter. I'll just quote it. He said, we've changed our logistics, transportation, supply chain, purchasing, and third-party seller processes to prioritize stocking and delivering essential items like household staples, sanitizers, baby formula, and medical supplies. And we prioritize this. So he goes on to talk about what Amazon is actually doing. And he says, at a time when many people are fearing their job, we're hiring 100,000 people, new temporary workers, to get those orders out. He says, we hope people who are laid off elsewhere will come and work with us until they get their jobs back. And so whether this applies to your business or not, the point is that tell people what you're doing now, what you're trying to do, over communicate, and make sure all supervisors, leaders have the same messages. All right, number 4, gratitude. This is a big one for me. This one, you can really see the anxiety equation, the belief I can cope and get through this. A lot of gratitude is about mental health, improving it. He says in his letter, he said, I'm not alone in being grateful for the work you are doing. He says, your efforts are being noticed. He said, everyone is at risk these days, and being noticed and valued is especially important when people are working and feeling scared and unsettled. So part of this thing about gratitude, there's science behind having an attitude of gratitude. You actually attract more positive when you're in this attitude of gratitude. But as a leader, isn't it true? You might be nodding or you might be shaking your head, then I would call BS on you. Isn't it true that we don't, as leaders, instinctively share that gratitude with people, tell them how much we appreciate them? We get busy, yes, but we don't always do that. But in a time of crisis, being grateful for people and what they're doing, it's huge. People will actually go further and do more for you if you just say thank you and tell them our customers are making these comments. I want to let you know that I've seen a bulletin board in a big box store. This is a Costco warehouse. And many of you know I had a slip and fall and was off from my work for a while. So I decided on the advice of my doctor to get a side hustle. And I go to Costco and part-time do some physical work to keep my body healthy. It's a lot of fun, and I love the environment, the people there. And in the bulletin board in the lunchroom, you'll see now that there's little sticky notes and little tags of paper with comments from customers about how awesome the staff are day by day, because at the warehouse they're social distancing and spraying and cleaning and putting themselves at risk. Just amazing when you share that gratitude, what it does. All right, principle number 5, protection. And Bezos explained that he's taking various steps to protect the employees. Now, I'm not going to get into all that because most of you know things like that you can control: wash your hands, social distance, self-isolation if you think you've been exposed, testing, all that kind of stuff. But this is interesting because he acknowledged reality. He says, he wrote in the letter, he said, when our turn for masks come, our first priority will be getting them in the hands of our employees and partners, working to get essential products to people. And he made a commitment that it's not a once and done situation. He actually said that the order they placed for those masks wasn't fulfilled. So he's telling them, hey, we did apply for an order to get, where you put in an order to get these masks, but I'm so sorry, they're on their way, but the order hasn't been filled yet. It's not our turn because there's such a demand. Now, you see, if you do that, if you're truthful and you tell people, then what happened in the United States Postal Service article, creating this doom and gloom, employees saying, our managers don't care, our supervisors don't care, and this is putting us at risk. My grandmother might die. I mean, what a bunch of garbage, right? But the truth is, if they had just communicated that, hey, we've ordered sanitary supplies for 630,000 people, it's hard to get those now because everybody in the world wants them. We appreciate you. We're all in the same boat. We're going to come up with an alternate idea. And by the way, if you find a package of wipes in your store, buy it and we'll reimburse you. They could have done something to communicate, but they didn't. All right. So let's just backtrack here and summarize where we're at. We're almost finished the 7 principles. Number 1 was acknowledge reality. 2, reinforce the mission. 3, what are we doing now? 4, gratitude. 5, protection. In other words, protecting people. Number 6, reassurance. This is more mental health stuff, everybody, but letting people know there's always a future. And, being a leader involves letting people know who work for you that you're still looking forward to the future, that there's hope, right? We want to say it, even though we might think, hey, well, people generally get that. They don't. There are people that feel that businesses are going to go out and under. They're hearing about this. Here's a scary stat. In the area I live, they're saying that 10% of businesses, restaurants, are bankrupt. And in the next 30 days, if they're not opened, 30%, or I think it was 28% of all restaurants in our beautiful province of British Columbia, which is known for tourism and cuisine, will be out of business. Incredible. So, here's the thing. He's reassuring people that there's hope, there is a future, and he's doing everything he can. He's not lying to them. But the thing he wrote, he said, my own time and thinking is now wholly focused on COVID-19 and on how Amazon can best play its role. I want you to know Amazon will continue to do its part, and we won't stop looking for new opportunities to help. You see, he's being personal. He says there's no instruction manual for how to feel at this time like this, and I know this causes stress for everyone. I love this line. He says, my list of worries right now, like yours, I'm sure, is long. Everybody, you know me, the quiet warrior, I talk about vulnerability, and a lot of leaders, they don't show vulnerability. They think it's a weakness. They're wrong. Get over it. Vulnerability is a strength. When you show vulnerability, people see them as just like you, and then they start to speak up and they start to share. So he's sharing how he's worried, and some of that is a form of stress and anxiety. So if we want to increase that bottom of that equation, giving people hope to reduce anxiety, well, guess what? As a leader, say, you know what, I don't know how you feel, but I go to bed at night thinking about this, and my worry list is quite long. But you know what? We're in this together, and we'll get through it. We got to talk about it. We can't be silent, because if we're silent, we can't lead the masses forward, everybody. Winston Churchill had some great lines. I'm just pulling a piece of paper here. The radio, he did a radio address, Second World War, to advise citizens that, to advise citizens about, the Nazi aggression, and wanted to influence the outcome of the war in Europe. But he put things in a way that inspired people to embrace the challenges ahead rather than endure them sheepishly, like some leaders we see today is, right? We could have some fun with that and turn that part of that Churchill speech into something for COVID-19. We shall socially distance on the beaches. We shall socially distance in the parks. We shall self-isolate in our living rooms and basements. We shall never give up. If I had my old limey accent, many of you don't know, but I was born in the UK on a military base when my dad was in the British Army before coming to my wonderful home of Canada. But I had this incredible thick accent, English accent. Yes, absolutely I did. And so reassurance is a big one, reassuring people, all right, and be vulnerable. And the last point, number 7, is mindset. Now, Amazon has this mindset that they call it, believe it, well, it's always day one. And Bezos explained that. Let me explain what he means by that. When he built Amazon day one, and like most of you, if you know about entrepreneurship, I created my own company, by the way. Most entrepreneurs start their companies in their basement or on their dining room table. It's an idea, and they start with their computer and marketing that idea. And it's only later, maybe some years later, where you start to build a team of people and scale that business, make it bigger with processes and systems and maybe more offices, whatever that is. But here's the thing about what he said, believe it's always day one, because he said on day one, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to have laser focus on the issues of the day. Like for some entrepreneurs, when I run my company, my number one focus some days is making sure payroll's met, or making sure the lights are on and customers are using the product services I have. This is really important, the mindset. He says that, simply a laser focus, having a list of simple steps and strategy and tactics is absolutely important. But it's brilliant because he says, and then it's day 2, which is stasis, then followed by irrelevance, followed by excruciating, painful decline, followed by death. And he says, and that is why it is always day 1. That's such a cool mindset. But just remember, when you're a leader, every day to lead. And remember, it's always day one. Have a laser focus and always communicate, over communicate. So these 7 principles, it's an awesome template. I'm not saying that that's the one you can use, but I've tied in mental health. Remember the anxiety equation. So basically, one, laser focus, communicating to people that they believe they can cope with this situation is very important. And over communicating facts and information, even if you're stumbling, so that they can believe lesser that bad things will happen and more that they can cope with this. Because everybody, this global pandemic will pass. Sadly, there'll be a lot more losses before it does. But the world has the power of the human race. And I had a great motivational quote that I'd used before about the power of the human race. No matter what, when we all come together, we can accomplish anything. That simply is our power. And as one of my great mentors and gurus, although he says he's not my guru because the greatness is within each of us, but Tony Robbins, if you know the work he does, which is very inspiring to millions of people, he says that all you need is within you now. And so let me close my solo cast on that note, that for everybody listening to me, all you need is within you now to get through this COVID-19. They call it a black swan. It's a crisis. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Believe that you can cope with the things that are happening. And if you're a leader, over-communicate. Communicate often, no matter what. Try to use some of the principles I talked about that Jeff Bezos may have given us the gift as a template. And please, the last and most important, and I beg people, please take accountability to not blame leaders and managers above you or sideways, and the top down. If employees aren't cleaning or things aren't getting done or people are not coming to work because they're afraid, don't blame them. Everybody owns this issue together, and we all need to be on the same page. And when we are, we can get through this. So everybody, find my podcast on your favorite podcast channel. Please subscribe to it so you can catch the weekly episodes of The Quiet Warrior Show and live the life that you deserve and desire. Find that true passion of yours and, well, stay in touch and listen to my show and know that you're part of a tribe and that you can cope with what's happening now and the strength that we're all going to get from these moments in time, everybody, are preparing us, as God says, it's preparing us for a special purpose, a greater purpose beyond what is happening today in our world. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca